The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, America. Good morning, world. Good morning, CHD. Welcome. Once again, my name is Michael Kane. I am the Director of Advocacy for Children's Health Defense. Today, we are going to talk about the national battle for religious exemptions to vaccination. Massachusetts is in the crosshairs, and we have on today Allison Chapman from Health Action Massachusetts, a phenomenal organization that has defended the religious exemption to vaccination for children in Massachusetts for years, but this year feels different. And at Children's Health Defense, what's happening in Massachusetts is now a national priority. We're feeling that there might be a Battle of Boston coming soon. There might be the need for all of us to head to Massachusetts. We're not there yet. So we're going to talk to Allison a little bit about that. Then after that, I'm going to bring on my good friend and mentor, John Gilmore, to talk about what's happening with religious exemptions, past and current and future, from the repeal in 2019 for New York, 2016 for California, Connecticut. What happened there? What's changed? What's happening now? And what's going on in Washington, D.C., because a lot is going on there behind the scenes, and no one knows more about that than John Gilmore. He's been up on the Hill the past couple of months. So we're going to get into that stuff. But first, as always, before we go into that, we're going to do some news. Today's show's about religious exemptions to vaccination for kids. But religious exemptions for adults still matter, especially in deep blue states. The Defender covered this headline: New York teachers fired for refusing the COVID vaccine. Take case to the U.S. Supreme Court. I'm the lead plaintiff in that case. The case was originally called Kane versus de Blasio. It's referred to Kane versus City of New York nowadays. I call it Kane versus Adams. Eric Adams, the current mayor of New York City, who could end this all with his pen, but is choosing not to do so. Check out that article. We're trying to get the Supreme Court to hear the case. Should know in a couple of months if that happens or not. We shall see. Speaking of Eric Adams, the current mayor of New York City, one of our biggest champions in New York City has fired unvaccinated workers is Minority Leader Joanne Ariola. She is a city councilwoman. She heads up the Committee on Fire and Safety. And she spoke. She actually kind of broke some news recently when she was talking publicly about her private discussions with Eric Adams over a year ago about fired unvaccinated workers. Let's show Joanne Ariola here.
And that's what we're fighting for right now, for our disenfranchised municipal workers. Because they won their Article 78, you can correct me on any legalese.
No problem.
Article 78, they were mandated by a judge to go back, ordered by a judge to go back to work, get back pay, get their time back, and then Mayor still has not done it. He continues to appeal. Why? He's not even using corp counsel. We're paying for outside counsel. Millions of dollars. So I called the mayor directly. Mr. Mayor, you know that my heart lies with the first responders. I'm the only Republican to have a chair of a committee. I chair Fire and Emergency Management. And I take it very seriously. I sit on the Public Safety Committee. I take it very seriously. The Veterans Committee, I take it very seriously. Health Committee, very seriously. I say to Mr. Mayor, what are we going to do for the municipal workers? Councilwoman, I have a plan. Okay, I'm all ears. I can't tell you. Why can't you tell me? He said, well, I don't want it to leak to the press. I said, I won't say a word. I'll wait tell Phyllis, but I really wouldn't say a word to anybody else. I'm waiting for that plan for almost a year. There is no plan.
Yeah. Mayor Eric Adams has no plan to bring back fired unvaccinated workers. His plan is to keep us in court for years and decades. Shout out to Councilwoman Areola. She's always been a real warrior for fired unvaccinated workers in New York City. Our issue has some national news happening to it too. Fox News just broke this breaking: federal agencies are now required to protect religious expression in the workplace, according to a new government-wide memo that was obtained by Brooke Sigmund. So this idea of protecting religious liberties for adults and children is gaining steam in Washington, D.C. Speaking of Washington, D.C., one of my least favorite Washington, D.C. creatures, Randy Weingarten, the head of the National Teachers Union, just came out with another just brilliant statement for the world. Lou, let's roll that.
Conductor industry. And 3, we are about to announce a partnership with the World Economic Forum to create a curriculum that will lead to good jobs and solid careers in U.S. manufacturing.
So the National Teachers Union, the American Federation of Teachers, is partnering with the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum might be the most anti-union organization on the planet for manufacturing jobs in America. That all sounds like AI to me, by the way. Randy Weingarten is the one who greenlit the vaccine mandate on teachers. People like me, hundreds, thousands of us lost our jobs, lost our homes, some made homeless. So speaking of Randy Weingarten, here's another friend of Randy's. This just came up. My buddy, retired Lieutenant John McCarry, put this up. Remember this, guys? Kathy Hochul with the Vaxxed necklace, the Vaxed, and it shows here Eric Adams loved this jewelry. He asked Kathy, who's the governor of New York right now, if he could get earrings, Vaxed earrings. Well, hey, Kathy, you spelt it wrong. Vaxed is not what it is. It's Vax. There we go. That's how you spell it. 2 X's. Otherwise, you have a vowel, consonant, vowel. That's a long A sound, Vaxed. So learn to spell, Governor Hochul, please. Much appreciated. In other news, Representative Gosar has come out with a remarkable bill to strip liability protection from vaccine manufacturers. He had this bill last year. In the last session, he just brought it back now. Children's Health Defense is an outside supporter of this, officially on the press release that came out. Read that article in Defender. All the links are in the show notes below. I actually found out that Representative Gosar is actually friends with Senator Moreno. And Senator Moreno is on Ron Johnson's subcommittee. He attended the Voices of Vaccine Injured, where Polly Tommy and Brian Hooker gave testimony. But Senator Moreno made sure to talk about his issues directly when he had his time. Let's show a clip of Moreno.
So I think most Americans expect that when you get on a plane, you buy a car, you get on an elevator, you eat a meal, that there's a standard of care that company used. And if they didn't use a standard of care, that you have a path to get some sort of compensation for the lack of effort. I think most of us kind of expect that. But what's interesting about this industry, the government has decided that this particular industry gets a free pass, that this particular industry doesn't have to be liable to anybody. You make a car that kills somebody, you're liable. Will a car have an accident? Of course. Flying is the safest thing you can do. But are there accidents? Of course. But why are we exempting certain industries? And of course, then you start thinking, well, what's the money that goes into it? When you go to make a decision for your child, is a doctor actually being a fair arbiter? Or are they thinking, hey, there's a pharmaceutical rep that's going to pay me based on how many vaccines I prescribed, how many prescriptions I fill? That's a whole different world. So if we're going to do something, the North Star has got to be medical freedom. I get to decide. I get to decide what's good for me and my family with proper information. And if I'm given improper information, just like in any other industry, there's got to be accountability.
The North Star is medical freedom. Shout out to Senator Moreno because of those comments and others that he said he only ran for office because of COVID. He wants a reckoning on what happened on COVID. The CEO of Children's Health Defense, Mary Holland, and myself, we wrote a letter. We sent it to Senator Moreno talking about some next steps we think should happen. And him and his staff seem to be enthusiastic about that. We should have that letter should be published in the Defender soon, and hope to be talking about that very soon. If the North Star is medical freedom, what shouldn't be happening is taking away choice. And in Massachusetts, they are trying to take away choice. And Health Action Massachusetts has an action alert that they have just put out opposing H2554. This bill would get rid of the religious exemption to vaccination and do other terrible things. And right as this is getting pushed to a floor vote in the House, that's what it seems like is happening. We're going to talk about that. The AAP came out with a statement saying that all non-medical exemptions need to be removed, need to be gone across the entire nation, right as this battle is heating up in Massachusetts and Boston. And with that, I want to bring on from Health Action Massachusetts, Allison Chapman. Allison, thank you so much for coming on here and talking to us about this.
Thank you for having me. It's important.
Yeah, of course. So, and Dawn's going to have you on tomorrow to go in even deeper on this, on Advocacy Lifeline tomorrow. So people who are interested in this, you definitely want to check out the show tomorrow at 10 a.m. when Dawn's going to go even deeper into this issue. But right now, for me, this has national implications, right? We're seeing the AAP comes out is talking about every state needs to get rid of religious exemptions. And there seems to be this big focus on Massachusetts, even more so than in the past, because you guys have beat this bill down every year over a decade. Talk to me a little bit about this, talk to the audience about what they need to know, wherever you want to start with this, Allison.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that if you went on Oppose Overreach, which is our page on Facebook right now, we have this great graphic, and Candace put it up. It describes exactly how these people are all interplayed with each other, right? The AP is partnered with Safe Communities, Vaccinate Your Family, Mass, and they're all in partnership with Merck, GlaxoSmithKline, Sanofi Pasteur. We have this whole graphic right on Oppose Overreach. Share that, because that's exactly what's happening. Why this, like I said with John earlier, there's no coincidences. This is not a coincidence. The AAP came out with that this week. We have also discovered that the Safe Communities and Vaccinate Your Family and Vaccinate Your Family Mass, who again are being paid for essentially by pharma, have been stalking our webpage every day. They've decided our information is very interesting to them, and they're trying to counter. They're trying to see what we're doing. So clearly they have some concerns about us. And that's because we don't generally ever get involved in the baiting arguments that they present to us. Like, this is about people's sincere religious beliefs, right? They want to talk about it being, safe or unsafe vaccines. That's not the question here. The question is children and their absolute, right to an education. And they don't want to talk about the fact that they want to kick kids out of school. Last year in October 2024, I came across one of their new studies. This is, again, AAP has split personality disorder, because in 2024, they said that they recommend that nobody gets kicked out of school or suspended. They had 20 years of research. School suspension, expulsion harms students disproportionately with marginalized identities. And they offered in there some solutions like across the board, they need anti-bias training. which I find, ironic with what's happened yesterday. They want you to be biased, scared of kindergartners, and they want you to increase religious, intolerance. And these are all things that they said that was dangerous to not just to society as a whole. Increases prison time. It increases medical dysfunction and mental issues, mental health issues, and it increases all of these things in a very marginalized population. And that's exactly what they're trying to do today, is get rid of children who are in marginalized populations. And I think this is extremely important that people stay out of the whole, let's decide if somebody who's injured by a virus versus a vaccine is a competition that you want to get involved in. There's no competition. Children all deserve an education. These are talking points they try to get you into, but this is very much a national issue because Massachusetts hasn't wanted to put this forward before. We've had very rational arguments. Massachusetts prides itself on anti-discrimination. That's their biggest thing. So the fact that they have to really pull some punches here and pay a lot of money and get a lot of lobbyists in there, and those lobbyists have been in there every day.
Yeah, it's fascinating. We saw an attack on Hawaii's religious exemption to vaccination, and that got beat down pretty quickly. They backed off really within a couple of weeks, maybe a month, not even. We'll see what happens next. We got to keep our eyes there because, these things never die. They always seem to come back. In Massachusetts, they're really seeming to pull out all the stops. I know you're going to get into the gritty details tomorrow, but I do want to talk about one right now that I think is important. Every year, a bill to repeal the religious exemption in Massachusetts gets voted out of committee favorably, out of the health committee favorably, but usually goes to Ways and Means, or John Gilmore calls Ways and Means the place that bills go to die, right? So we're going to have John on in a bit. So that's always good. When you see it go there, usually nothing happens with it. But that's not what just happened. This bill has been recommended over to a different committee that has the ability to get it to the House floor in Boston. Talk to that just a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm going to go into a lot of detail on that and things that people are really going to need to hear it when I meet with Dawn tomorrow. But it is a scary and frightening thing this week, what happened. We don't have enough information on as to why, who did this. It's got sent to a steering committee that nobody knows anything about, even the people who work on it. So we don't exactly know why it went there. It's an inappropriate place. And we're hoping to move it. And that's where some of the action alert that you put up earlier is about that. This is dangerous because, the stuff they've been using before, people are abusing their religious exemption. People are, that's what Vargas says repeatedly. All these things that they've repeated over the years haven't worked. And I think what's happening is that nationally, they're frightened. The Maha movement has been something that has changed a lot of talk. I think every Democrat that I know is like, get the food dyes out of those food in the lunch. Come on. So we have a bill for that too. But the thing is if everybody's agreeing and it's across the board, they're in trouble. So this is like their big, backlash, final, stand type of thing. And we're worried. We're certainly concerned, but we want we need everybody in the country, but especially every person here watching from Massachusetts. We're going to need everybody to be watching, being on your toes, ready to run. If we need people at the State House, if we need thousands, and we need a New Jersey type 10,000 person in the end, we're going to need help. Really, really going to need everyone.
Absolutely. The action alert that Health Action Massachusetts has will be in the show notes here. Children's Health Defense is sending out our own action to everybody in Massachusetts. And just as Allison said, pretty soon, we're probably going to have a national action alert about this, maybe focused on the governor over there in Massachusetts, because this has implications beyond just Massachusetts. And as a movement, everybody who wants choice and wants to make America healthy we must stand with our brothers and sisters in Massachusetts. Allison, thank you so much. I wish we had more time for the segment. Everybody tune in tomorrow, Wednesday, with Dawn Richardson on Advocacy Lifeline, where they're going to go in depth on this. Definitely check it out. Allison, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. So there are national implications here, and my guru on these issues for sure, I talk to as much as I can about this, the president of Autism Action Network, John Gilmore. John, come on here. How you doing this morning?
Great. How you doing?
I'm good. I am good. I actually, you remember this shirt?
Yes, I do.
So in 2019, you and Rita Palmer got these shirts together for everybody that went to New York fighting to keep the religious exemption to vaccination. Then we were there. We rallied. The Del Bigtree was there. We lobbied. There was another guy there. Bobby was there. As a matter of fact, Bobby has even spoken to this issue recently when he was on Charlie Kirk. Lou, let's show that quick clip of Secretary Kennedy.
I mean, those companies, we have a free market system in this country, and part of that is that there's consequences if you make a bad product. And, vaccines are particularly exempt from that because there's no free market economy. Normally, if you get poisoned by Coca-Cola, you can stop drinking Coca-Cola. But if you get poisoned by a vaccine, your kids still have to take that vaccine to get into the school. If your doctor tells you your child will die because, he can look and see what happened to elder siblings, there's some kind of genetic vulnerability that's affected the older siblings, and the doctor wants to tell you your third child should not take this vaccine, he's going to be punished for that. And also the schools won't let you go to school no matter what. So in New York and California, there's not only no religious exemptions, there's no philosophical exemptions, but there also effectively is no medical exemption. So these kids, it's mandated, and because it's mandated, there's no market forces that tell you, that allow you, if you don't like the product, if you have reservations about it, you can't stop using it. You got to take it anyway.
Talk about a national conversation. The Secretary of HHS bringing up all these issues, even that we don't have a medical exemption here in New York. So we're seeing more and more of this rising. John, talk to this, please.
Yeah, well, it just seems like, there's just the whole issue is really, really blowing up. And it really seems like the battle lines are being drawn. I mean, as Allison was just saying, with their fight that they're having going on in Massachusetts, they're seeing this really, really big, obvious pharma presence that really wasn't there in other states. They were there, but they were in the background. Here, they're right out in front. They're giving money to the AstroTurf groups and so on and so forth. This is something new, right? And now you got the pediatricians basically, staking out their claim, and the battle lines are just there, right? And that's all new. But what's also new is what's going on in Washington, right? Since the election, there is a completely new attitude there. I mean, obviously, we're seeing this from Secretary Kennedy, but we're also seeing it on the Hill as well. There's a lot of legislators up there, a lot of members of Congress, a lot of senators chomping at the bit to get things done, right? And you mentioned Bernie Moreno doing something. I'm sure he's going to come out with a bill. And like you said, I've been going down to Washington, and it's a completely different atmosphere down there. I haven't really seen it like that in a very, very, very long time. And what I'm talking about is that, where we are being welcomed, we're being taken seriously. There are concrete plans to go forward with things. And there's just a huge amount of energy there on all kinds of levels, okay? We've got a lot of issues, but there's a lot of tools out there that can be used. And there's, I think, a lot of really serious energy happening out there. There is new legislation. There's going to be more legislations. We might see executive orders. I don't have any inside information, but there's lots of talk about that. There's regulatory changes being discussed. There's lawsuits of various kinds being discussed, right? And they're all going to be the kind of things that people like us are really going to be happy to see, right? So this is just a really kind of an extraordinary time, and the stakes are getting very, very high. And I think that's what you're kind of motivating the AAP, right? They're seeing the stakes are really, really high. I mean, and I mean this with all seriousness, pediatricians are essentially the retail face of the vaccine cartel. Their main job is to give vaccines. That's where most of their office visits come from. That's where most of their billing comes from. And they deny it, but there's studies out there that show some vaccine practices get 80% of their revenue from given vaccines. So, it's stark. And I think we're really going to be seeing big changes. And I'm seeing changes in the discussion, right? We're very concerned about religious exemptions. I've spent countless hours fighting for religious and medical and secular exemptions in states, in New York City, other places as well. But I think what's going on is I think the Overton window is moving, all right? The frame is changing. And what the frame is moving to, and I think this is a matter of time before we get there, is why do we need exemptions? Okay. Yep. You only need exemptions if there's some authority out there that has the legitimate power to make you do stuff. And people are really, really questioning that now. All right. Perfect example of that is Idaho, right? Idaho just passed this bill. They don't have mandates anymore. I talk to a lot of legislators and I say, 46 states have religious exemptions. That's really wrong. It's 45. Idaho doesn't have exemptions anymore. You don't need an exemption in Idaho. It's just you decide what you're going to do, in discussion with your healthcare providers. And I think eventually that's the way it's going to be in a lot of the places. It's the way we have to go.
It's definitely the way we need. It's definitely the way that we need to go. It's definitely what all the critical organizations in our movement, such as yours, CHD, Health Freedom Defense Fund. I mean, so many. We're all fighting for that goal. But along the way, there are 4 states that you cannot opt your kids out of vaccination.
Absolutely.
Those 4 states make up 20% of the U.S. population. So we do need some stop guards. We do need some ability to help people right away. There are people that need relief. I think that's where the talk about exemptions, John, and where the battles that we're involved in, really come from, is finding relief for real people in these states.
We desperately need it in New York. We desperately need it in California. I mean, as you said, in New York these days, you can't even get a medical exemption. The state of New York right now is hunting down kids who have long-standing medical exemptions and kicking them out of school. So my approach to all this is harm reduction. Okay, we need to do what we can do to stop harm from occurring. And that means you got to be flexible, right? The things that work right now in Idaho are going to be different than what works in New York. It's going to be different what's going on in Massachusetts. We have to have as many tools as possible. We have to use the tools that we can use to get us where we want to go. And we also have to be willing to go in steps. I think sometimes people want some massive leap, from here to there, right? And it just doesn't work that way. It's kind of like football, right? How do you win in football? You go most of the time, you're going a few yards at a time until you actually get to the goal line, right? And I think that's the way we got to think, John, in football, sometimes foot pass, but that's rare.
Yeah, John, I really appreciate that. I appreciate the perspective. I want to talk about why people should trust you right now. When you talk about the conversation has changed, I know you, Rita Palma, Kate Corrigan, and others, people with CHD, have been on the Hill for the past 2 months. I would estimate you guys have talked to me about nearly 50 meetings that you've had all throughout Washington, D.C. And I think it was just shortly after those meetings, the bulk of them, Charlie Kirk tweets saying all 50 states should have, and then Candace Owens, all 50 states should have religious exemptions to vaccination. Now, this week, the AAP says all 50 states should not have any exemptions. We feel the tensions rising. We feel this coming up to becoming a truly national issue. I didn't go to the Battle of Trenton. I wasn't there. I watched it from afar. For those who don't know, after New York lost their religious exemption, there was a battle in Jersey. 8,000 people showed up there. Jamel Holly, Del Bigtree, Bobby Kennedy, so many people were there, and they beat it down. It was this moment that the medical freedom movement nationally was like, holy smokes. And then a few months later, COVID happens, right? And then the whole world changes. But Massachusetts, I've heard some people talking about a battle in Boston might be brewing. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about that, what your thoughts are, what you would say to medical freedom people, especially in the Northeast, across the country, as we're looking at Massachusetts and this battle lines that are being drawn?
I think that's what we're headed to. I think you're right. I think there's going to be a real confrontation here in Massachusetts.
Peaceful. I just want to say peaceful confrontation, of course.
Peaceful confrontation, of course, you know. But you know, like I was saying before, there's big visible pharma money behind this, right? And this is really important to them. Massachusetts has a very large biomed sector in their economy, you know, and I think this is particularly people in blue states, like really blue states, got to pay attention to this, right? Because they take this stuff on the road, right? They'll probably go from here, maybe they'll go back to Jersey, maybe they'll go to Maryland, you know, maybe they'll go to Washington and Oregon, who knows, you know, but it's definitely something that we got to worry about. And so, I mean, we got to follow the cue from the people like Allison Chapman who are on the ground there in Boston. But, you know, I think we need to be ready to get a call, you know, to respond, to get out there. And I also think you folks out there in the friendly media out there, you need to be talking about what's going on in Boston, like this show. It's a really, really important battle, and it's going to be coming to a head probably pretty soon, right? So you other folks out there, if you can get to Boston at some point, I think we're really going to need your presence there. So
well, and I would say everybody stay on standby, right? Because we don't need dribs and drabs going. We want to know when the call happens because we need to go up there overall in force. John, unfortunately, we are out of time now. Everybody needs to check out John at autismactionnetwork.org. He will certainly be back on this show. He is a regular because he always has such insightful commentaries for all things medical freedom. John Gilmore, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks a lot, Michael. Appreciate it.
So don't go anywhere. Coming up next, we have two segments. One, we have Tony Lyons is interviewing why am I blanking? Peter McCullough and John Leake on their new book that is just coming out on CHD Books and Skyhorse Books. And also there is one more story of the unvaccinated that is going to be coming up right after that. So don't go anywhere. Stick around for that interview and that segment. Peace, everybody.
Good morning, CHD viewers. We have a terrific show today that's going to feature John Leake and Dr. Peter McCullough talking about their incredible new book, Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality. So I'd like to start off with John and just ask you this. Why did you guys think that this was the great time, the best time to write this book? What inspired you to write it?
Well, Dr. McCullough and I have been talking since 2021 about the strange way in which the COVID-19 so-called vaccine, it's actually a genetic transfer product, a synthetic messenger RNA product, the sort of haste and also I would characterize it as chicanery, even outright fraud with which it was rolled out and imposed on all of mankind. And so over the last 4 years, we've just had conversations. If we were to go back in history and look at the entire vaccine enterprise from the beginning, is there a sort of red thread that goes from history all the way back to the early 18th century all the way up to the present with our COVID-19 vaccine. And what we discovered is a remarkable uniformity of how mankind has conceived of vaccines from the beginning. And I think our primary surprising discovery is that it hasn't really been a strictly scientific enterprise. I would characterize vaccines and mankind's fascination and obsession with vaccines is more akin to a religion. And I studied philosophy, metaphysics, and religion. So it was something that I was fascinated by and found myself very drawn into the story, going back to where we start, the smallpox outbreak in Boston, Massachusetts in 1721. Dr. McCullough has all along the way brought to bear his medical scientific evaluation, and we've come to the same conclusion. I, as a historian, and Dr. McCullough, as a treating physician and medical scientist, we've kind of found out that we have the same view of the matter. So it was easy to write the book together.
So, Peter, let's switch to you here. My question is, you're using the words mythology and ideology. John kind of touched on that, but you've said before that skepticism is the bedrock of science. Why is it that we're not allowed to question vaccine science?
Unlike other areas of medicine, vaccinology, in a sense, is taken on a religious tone in medicine, and one can't challenge the religion of vaccinology. If we were to question cholesterol lowering medicine or blood pressure lowering, we could have a healthy debate. But as we research this, from the very beginning of medical history, there has not been a fair debate or discourse over vaccines, despite there being controversy from the very beginning. There was a very heavy hand, a theme of hubris, of arrogance, power, and money from the very beginning, Tony. And that's what we saw really come into full view in the COVID-19 pandemic.
So, John, here's a question for you. If vaccines are so safe and so effective, why do the manufacturers need a liability shield?
Well, as the manufacturers themselves plainly stated to Congress in 1986, well, I should say, we all know 1986 is a landmark moment with this legislation granting vaccine manufacturers blanket liability protection for all vaccines. But what I discovered in my research was the forbidden fruit of liability protection actually happened with the swine flu vaccine of 1976, which is an absolutely astonishing fiasco that, although 60 Minutes reported on it in a very critical way in a 1979 60 Minutes segment, we've forgotten that the 1976 swine flu was truly a fiasco. But as the vaccine manufacturers discovered, if you get liability protection, it doesn't really matter what the outcome of the mass vaccination program is. The United States government ends up footing the bill for, in the case of 76, it was about 500 cases of Guillain-Barré syndrome and about 35 deaths before the program was halted. Well, as far as the vaccine manufacturers were concerned, that was the problem of the U.S. government. And in fact, it was. They had received liability protection. So they tasted the fruits of that in 76. And they again asked for that in 86 and were granted full liability protection. And, there was a famous Supreme Court, a landmark Supreme Court case, Brusewitz versus Wyeth. And Justice Sotomayor wrote the dissenting opinion in this landmark case. And she said, granting the vaccine manufacturers liability protection has, in effect, completely eliminated any incentive to improve them, to critically evaluate and improve the technology to make it safer. So that was a long way of answering your question. There is going to be a certain percentage of the population, and this is acknowledged by the manufacturers, that is injured or killed, but the intellectual approach to this is that number of children who are maimed or injured or killed, the proposition is that it will be that number will be grossly outnumbered by those who would otherwise suffer severe illness or death from the infectious disease. We have come to the conclusion that that's not exactly clear. That's one of the things that we discuss in the book. We have reason to doubt that proposition.
Yeah, it seems like it would be very hard to figure it out, given that in 1986, part of the proposition was that vaccines were so dangerous and they were going to lead to such great liability that then these companies needed full protection, or they were just going to either go out of business or stop creating these vaccines. So, that's a hard part of it to sort of get beyond, in that, what are they really trying to accomplish? In 1986, there were only 7 vaccines. Now we have, in some cases, people are getting 73, sometimes even more. So, Dr. McCullough, do you think that there was any real rationale or any logic to the idea that every future vaccine should get total liability protection, even though these are just products like any other product and they're all different?
There never was any rationale for it. And then we started to see practices change across the world. For example, in Sweden, when there was a safety problem with the cellular pertussis vaccine, for 17 years, Sweden had no pertussis vaccination whatsoever. And there wasn't a rebound of large numbers of cases of pertussis. The measles, mumps, rubella vaccine has been raised as a concern, that it's too much given all at once, and that triple combination causing side effects. And so Japan just doesn't allow it. They separate the vaccines. So you see this differential in worldwide vaccination practice. And then the other thing we point out is that infectious diseases and the fatalities from them have consistently come down over time with modern sanitation and food and air and water quality, with testing, antibiotics. And so the threat of measles mortality 100 years ago is not the same threat today, and neither is it for diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus, or any of the infections. And in fact, in my clinical practice, I've never tested somebody for diphtheria or pertussis because we treat, a bronchitis with azithromycin. So what we've uncovered is that the vaccine religion or ideology says that vaccines are good. That means more is even better. And that there is a complete willful blindness to the safety of giving vaccines in combination. There's also a blindness to medical necessity or clinical indication. And I think where we're heading, Tony, is we're heading to a breaking point now. There is actually a burden of vaccination that children and the population face at hand. And people now across the entire world are starting to raise questions. So our book couldn't be better timed on how humanity got into this predicament.
I agree. I mean, I think that there really, hasn't ever been a time like this where people are starting to open up, people are willing to think about these things. And the idea that you can give liability protection against a product that hasn't been created yet. So you haven't looked at any studies, you don't know what's in it. It doesn't matter. Just the fact that you call it a vaccine means that it's safe and effective, even though the actual definition of a vaccine And correct me if I'm wrong, John, but I believe that it's changed 5 times since 1986. So that we don't even really know what a vaccine is, but we do know that it's always safe and effective, regardless of what it is, regardless of what the studies show. And that seems to me to be potentially really just absurd, but there should be a question. So the question is, do you think that it's fair to say that vaccines work?
Doctor, would you like to take that, or shall I take?
We have in our title, we also have reality. And reality is, the observation, that we don't have large numbers of measles cases anymore. We simply don't. We don't have large numbers of chickenpox cases anymore. And, some of these illnesses we can remember as children. I got mumps as a child and chickenpox, and almost all the children my age got those illnesses. My parents got measles, and everyone in their age group got measles. So we have seen large-scale reductions in these illnesses, and I think vaccines have played a role in that. However, for every vaccine, there seems to be a price to pay, and that price to pay in many ways has been concealed from the public. It has not been acknowledged by the medical orthodoxy. It's almost as if this vaccine ideology wants to essentially say that it's the greater good of humanity that matters, and that if there are collateral damage, if there are casualties along the way, or even long-term side effects, that humanity just has to take it. So let me give you an example. Chickenpox has largely gone away. That's terrific. But now multiple studies show that those who've taken the chickenpox vaccine have a higher risk of shingles later on. So guess what? Now we have a shingles vaccine. Now we have a vaccine for a problem emerging, increased numbers from chickenpox vaccination. We no longer have large numbers of cases of measles, but in our book does spend a lot of time on this. We see a disturbing trend in increases in childhood neuropsychiatric diseases like autism spectrum disorder. And so there seems to be, and this has been my experience, Tony, in medicine as a doctor, there's no free lunch. For everything we do in medicine, there's always a counterbalancing force. There are risks and benefits, and what we make the case for is we need transparency. We need fair, balanced discussion. We can't have religious zealotry fuel this entire vaccine industry, at costs to the population.
Yeah, I would second that. I mean, the greatest irony is during the COVID-19 pandemic, we heard Anthony Fauci and others in our U.S. health agencies repeating the mantra, and it had a very mantra-like quality: we follow the science. But I think what's been remarkable to us as we've delved into this story is it hasn't really been a scientific enterprise. In fact, there's been a veil drawn over the enterprise where you can't subject the enterprise to scientific scrutiny. I mean, if you start the very act of raising questions, I mean, we saw this with the experience of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. going back to 2005. You can't even question this. And if you do, you're outcast and smeared and thrown out of polite society. If you're a medical professional, you're thrown out of the College of Physicians. Well, this is eerily similar to during the great religious wars of Europe in the 16th and 17th centuries, of being branded a heretic. If you question religious orthodoxy like Martin Luther in Germany, well, you're excommunicated. And so we see this tendency to censure and excommunicate anybody who questions this. And we believe we're actually taking a scientific approach to this in our evaluation. The other thing I would like to note is that we're not anti-vaxxers. We see that there is utility in the concept. It's a very interesting concept. It just needs to be subjected to greater analysis and discussion.
That makes a lot of sense to me. So, Dr. McCullough, you had said that, due to better sanitation and those kinds of things, the dangers of viruses has gone down. But I think that you've also mentioned that viruses get weaker over time. That if you look at the measles outbreaks from 1910 and the number of people that the records show died. I mean, it's very hard to know what comorbidities they may have had. But 50 years later, by 1960, that number, the 2,000 who died in 2010, then goes down to 400 by 1960 to 62. So do you think that vaccines sometimes get credit for doing work that was just going to happen anyway, that the viruses were going to get weaker over time?
Well, the vaccines get credit for reducing mortality despite having valid large-scale randomized trials demonstrating mortality reduction, or even valid observational data. These are just time trend data. And don't forget, for measles, we've gone all the way from no hospital care to full ICU care, nebulization machines, nebulized steroids, bronchodilators, secondary antibiotics, vitamin A protocols. We even have measles immunoglobulin we can give. So we actually have a full suite of measles treatment. And I think the treatment for the severe cases has made a huge difference. And don't forget, Tony, we've had a reduction in diseases for which there's no vaccines. Erysipelas has gone away as a disease. Rheumatic fever is essentially gone. Tuberculosis, we used to have tuberculosis sanatoriums. Tuberculosis is very much under control with screening, detection, and treatment. No vaccines in those areas. So we shouldn't give credit to vaccines without having the scientific evidence. But, our reality assessment, and, John and I, we've taken vaccines. I have children, they've taken all the vaccines. We're not against vaccines as an intervention. I've never been harmed by a vaccine. My children have not been harmed. But what we've observed now is almost a form of mania that's come over the population. And this came into full view with the COVID-19 vaccines, where now we have a modified synthetic messenger RNA platform by and large being used. We're told that this vaccine needs to be given indefinitely every 6 to 12 months, irrespective of whether or not someone has had the infection. They can have the infection multiple times. They just keep taking the vaccine multiple times. It's a form of a mania. It's almost as if the vaccine represents a talisman or a good luck charm. I recently testified in the Senate, and there's now no more pushback about the dangers of the COVID vaccine or heart damage or blood clots. The final stand by the College of Cardinals of Vaccinology is that the COVID vaccines were worth it because they saved lives. And, I can tell you that assertion needs to be thoroughly challenged. In my view, it's not supported by the observations at hand. It's not supported by the data at hand. And it's my clinical interpretation that, sadly, the COVID-19 vaccines were an abject failure.
So you think that it's possible that we vaccinated billions of people, there were millions of injuries, but nobody really got a benefit?
I can't see that there was a benefit. Maybe early on, there could have been a reduction in the binary number of cases, but quickly after their approval, we were off to the Delta outbreak. And, vaccinated persons were coming down with COVID right and left. The CDC was overwhelmed with hospitalized and fatal cases of vaccinated persons. They just gave up keeping track. our CDC director comes out in August of 2021 and says the vaccines don't stop transmission. I mean, we had a wholesale admission the vaccines weren't working. So now I think, 5 years into this failed vaccine campaign, the vaccinologists are trying to pick up the pieces. A lot of medical organizations are just on the sidelines now. They're I think, very shamefully silent on what's happened. And there is a growing call, a chorus of people who want this to be evaluated. They certainly want vaccine safety and vaccine injuries, disabilities, and deaths to be recognized. And they want an approach to help the United States and the world heal from the damage of the COVID-19 vaccine campaign.
John, what do you think the real justification is for vaccine mandates? I mean, my view is that if they work, then the people who want them get protection, and the people who don't want them take their own risk. Why is that a problem?
Well, the rationale for mandates is that no vaccine works perfectly. It's not a perfect immunization in terms of absolutely sterilizing and preventing, every single transmission. So the rationale that we're told is that vaccines can, and I think it's a theoretical proposition, but they can actually result in herd immunity, not only protection of the individual. So that's the rationale. But again, I mean, if you take the COVID-19 vaccine, what I think is fascinating is that Anthony Fauci and two of his colleagues at the NIH in 2022, so after the COVID vaccine had rolled out and after he'd relentlessly advocated it, he and his colleagues published a paper in which they acknowledged something that a famous Australian immunologist named Robert Clancy told me over dinner one night, namely, vaccines injected into the arm that induce blood antibodies are really totally ineffective against influenza and coronaviruses that rapidly replicate in the nasal passage. There's just not sufficient contact between the blood antibodies and the nasal cavity during this early period of rapid viral replication in the nose. So Dr. Clancy told me that over dinner. I thought that was rather interesting. And then about 2 months later, I read a paper by none other than Dr. Anthony Fauci and his colleagues saying the exact same thing, that blood antibody vaccines are not effective against corona, and influenza viruses. Now, the purpose of their paper was to advocate the creation of a whole new generation of products. But obviously implicit in it was his admission that the COVID-19 vaccine program that he'd so passionately and zealously advocated didn't work. I mean, we turn up many things that we present in our book. All of this is cited. The readers can look at all of the papers themselves. I think our readership is going to be astonished by a lot of what we present in our book that's out there. It's not that it's a secret. It's just that our public institutions and our mainstream media don't talk about it.
Yeah, well, anything that you're not allowed to talk about, ought to make you really question what's going on. But, there's so many fascinating things in this book. And I was thinking, John, maybe you can just tell us the story of Edward Jenner. Who was he? What did he invent? What's the controversy all around him? It'd be a nice story for viewers.
Well, I think Edward Jenner is a very charming character. He reminds me of somebody out of a Jane Austen novel. Jane Austen had cousins in Gloucestershire, in a Cotswold village in Gloucestershire, and she gently satirized English society of this late 18th, early 19th century period. And Jenner was an aspiring naturalist. He wrote a paper on the cuckoo the bird for the Royal Society. His paper on the cuckoo was published, which made him a fellow of the Royal Society. He had heard stories in Gloucestershire of dairymaids who, the story was, and it was something of a wives' tale, but it was a charming wives' tale, that dairymaids who had contracted this blister-like illness on their hands that seemed to be transferred from the udders of dairy cattle, they called it cowpox, that dairy maidens who'd had cowpox on their hands, these blisters on their hands, the perception was when smallpox came to town, as it did every now and then, the dairy maids didn't get it. So the thought was, could it be that this milder illness of cowpox rendered protection against the more virulent disease of smallpox? So what Jenner did, this idea had been going around Gloucestershire for decades. But what Jenner did was he invoked his authority as a fellow of the Royal Society, and he performed what he claimed in his paper was a challenge experiment on a little boy who was the son of his gardener, a little boy named Phipps. And he claimed that he first inoculated the Phipps boy with cowpox, with the matter that he took from cowpox ulcers. So he first inoculated the little boy with cowpox, and then he subsequently gave the boy a dose of virulent smallpox. He had obtained the matter from a smallpox patient, and he claimed in his paper that it worked, that the inoculation procedure with cowpox protected the Phipps boy from smallpox. So it's a charming idea. He presents it in a paper with a lot of Latin, and it kind of is dressed up in the language of science. And the Royal Society rejected the paper, so he published it himself in a pamphlet in London. It didn't catch on at first. There were a lot of flaws in the first edition. He made a number of revisions, which we talk about in the book, which are very interesting. But a long story made short for this interview is that Jenner's pamphlet really caught on. And I use the expression a charming idea because there is something charming about it. I mean, the idea that you can take disease-causing matter that only causes a mild illness that you easily get through, and that then will protect you against a severe illness which can cause death, disfigurement. It's a lovely idea. And it's understandable why mankind became so fascinated with this idea. Our argument in the book is, in this initial enthusiasm, it's almost like falling in love. You know, they say love is blind. There was mankind fell in love with this idea and subsequently became blind to the innumerable signs that it was flawed. And so what we argue in our book is it goes back to Jenner. Mankind needs to start taking the blinders off and rationally evaluating this.
That makes a lot of sense to me. So let me ask Peter one more question, and that is, what do you think would happen if there were far fewer vaccines on the vaccine schedule now? Because, you know, we've been told so many times on national television by, you know, public policy people, by senior people in Washington that that vaccines save millions of lives. So what do you think would happen if we went back to the pre-1986 kind of levels where people got 5 or 7 or 9 vaccines?
You know, the CDC published in 2024 a paper in MMWR claiming that routine childhood vaccination saved well more than 1 million lives. And if you go back and just count the number of deaths due to infectious diseases before a single vaccine was used, just with modern care, if you go back and count the number of polio deaths, for example, and do the math, it's mathematically impossible that vaccines save that many lives, even if they were perfect. So these are exaggerated claims based on data sometimes centuries ago, ignoring all the modern advancements in care. I can tell you in terms of safety. Now, safety always trumps efficacy. And at the FDA, we always present data in terms of safety before efficacy. In terms of safety, here's some general principles. Early vaccines, and we review this in our book, have had side effects and complications, for sure. Almost all of them did. And then over time, the vaccines have become safer, and we acknowledge that. I think the polio vaccine is a good example, the injectable IPV polio vaccine. The second principle is vaccines given separately appear to be much safer than giving them in bundled combinations. That's the reason why the Japanese don't allow, for instance, giving the measles, mumps, rubella shot together. The third principle is vaccines are much safer if they're given later in life beyond the window of immunologic and neurologic development. When the baby is small and the immune system is developing and the neurologic system, there's a real opportunity to have vaccinations cause side effects. And one of the most frightening side effects for parents is a febrile seizure. That is getting a big battery of vaccines all at once. In the United States, that could mean around the age 12 to 15 months, that could mean receiving 16 different vaccines all at once. A complication could be a febrile seizure, actually going home, high fever, and having a seizure. The CDC tells us about 3 to 4% of babies per year have a seizure. A leading cause of that is vaccination. And a critical paper by Nilsson and colleagues from Sweden, examine this. And if a child has a febrile seizure of any cause, the chances of developing a neuropsychiatric disorder, having brain damage from the seizure essentially, and that includes tics and epilepsy and attention deficit disorder and autism spectrum disorder, the chances of that composite occurring, Tony, is 40% if a febrile seizure occurs. We also know that febrile seizures in the hospital are related to apnea. That's been shown in a randomized trial recently. And if apnea occurs at home and the parents aren't there to witness it, it can result in sudden infant death syndrome. So all of these pieces are falling into place that we may have come to a breaking point on the total burden of vaccines that children are expected to endure, including one started at the very beginning of life. So what may come from our work and the work of others, I anticipate, is a new normal where there's risk stratification, and when the risks clearly outweigh the benefits, that vaccines are given per individual for individual protection, and we give up this vaccine ideology, this aspiration of eliminating infectious diseases from the globe or protecting every single human. It is very unlikely in the future that we're going to have one size fits all, and that we'll have a much more rational approach. I mean, I'll give you an example. A child born with a respiratory condition like cystic fibrosis, they may need the full battery of respiratory vaccines to give them the type of protection that's warranted based on their risk. Whereas a child without a spleen, congenital asplenia, or if their spleen is removed due to treatment of a leukemia or lymphoma, they may require certain vaccines like meningococcal, Haemophilus, and pneumococcal vaccines. I mean, I strongly recommend those in my practice. But for a healthy child born today, and we have we spend time on this in our book, a healthy child born today, in today's modern era of medicine, multiple studies show that child is healthiest if they take no vaccines whatsoever.
Tony, if I could just add something that I would draw our audience their attention to this. It's something that we explicate very in great detail in our book, these extravagant claims that have been made for the last 30, 40 years about drastic reductions of mortality. So not morbidity. We're not talking about just the number of measles cases being reduced, but actual mortality from measles or mumps or rubella or diphtheria or whatever, any of the illnesses on the vaccine schedule. One of the things we do is we just go back and look at the US vital statistics data that has been published every year for many, many decades, going all the way back to the 1930s. And you just add up the deaths that are attributed each year to these infectious diseases. And the result of this very simple data reference is that before the modern vaccine schedule was introduced, mortality from all of these diseases had reduced by way more than 90%. I mean, I'll just give you an example. This is from chapter 1 of the book. In the year 1946, 2 years before the era of mass vaccination began with the combined diphtheria, pertussis, and tetanus vaccine, a total of 1,259 Americans died of diphtheria, 1,241 died of pertussis, and 585 died of tetanus, for a total of 3,085 deaths. Now, that's out of a nation in 1946, I think, of about 150 million people. The number of car accident fatalities that year in 1946, that data is published as well, was 10 times that number. So the other thing that we talk about is how the fear of infectious diseases is so amplified by our era of mass media, which is really introduced in the early 50s. By the time you get to the summer of 1952, which was the worst polio outbreak in recorded history, by then you have very uniform reporting of infectious diseases from all 50 states. That centralized reporting is combined with everybody having a radio and about 40% of the country already having a television. So this fear of infectious diseases is something that the attention of the entire country is relentlessly focused on. So that by the time you get to the year 1954 with Jonas Salk introducing the polio vaccine, most Americans were more afraid of atomic war than they were of polio. But in that worst year, the summer of 1952, there were 21,000 cases that were attributed to polio with some degree of paralysis. So 21,000 cases out of a population of 160 million people. Again, 10 times more people died in car accidents that year. But this relentless fear generation from mass media would have us believe that polio was this raging monster that was going to kill everybody. And so that putting this whole experience of infectious disease and immunization into perspective, I think our readers are going to be greatly surprised by a lot of the just published data.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an important book for people to read. Clearly, blind faith in any kind of a medical intervention is just really dangerous. And this book is an incredible antidote to that, to blind faith. You know, that if you read this book, you're engaging in a discussion with Dr. McCullough and John Leake, who have really researched this well, who have thought about it well. And, you know, you should, even if you're sure that you know what you believe, you should read this book, understand the history, and really begin to think it through from the start. You know, that there's never a point in your thinking where you should just quit, where you should be willing to say, I know the truth, or, you know, this is just settled science. There is no settled science. And this book answers many of the questions you will have, but it also raises all kinds of new questions that you haven't thought of. Thanks so much, both of you, for coming on the show. And I hope that everybody watching this decides to go out and read the book. It's going to be well worth your time.
Thank you, Tony.
Where are we on this one? Here we go. Okay, we've got another. I think we got to finish the day off, yours, and then another unvaccinated story.
That's
So
awesome.
it's really good to, actually there's many more people. Oh, by the way, if you see the lights coming on and off, there's a little bit of a generator problem. But never mind. Bless this bus and all that are in it.
Ready for it.
Lay hands on it.
Okay, so this is your only child
Yes.
for now. And how old is she?
16 months, so a year and 4 months.
16 months now. And also, do you want to tell everyone your name?
Oh, I'm Mary.
And Philip.
And this is Molly.
All right, I'm going to turn this generator thing off because it's looking so weird with the lights going on and off in the background. Just accept the fact that we have no lights.
Okay.
And now, what made you guys not decide that you were not going to vaccinate?
Okay, well, I didn't even know it was like an option. Like before we even had kids, I thought we'd have kids, we'd vaccinate them. I even like pinned on Pinterest how to get your kid to sit still 3 shots, like stuff like that. And then I was talking to my sister one day, and she told me that she didn't vaccinate her son, and I was like, that's an option. Like you could not vaccinate. And then she kind of started telling me her why, and we started talking through it. And the more I looked into it, the more I was like, we're not doing it.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, she's been awesome just about from the beginning. Like, she started doing the research and showing me stuff. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Oh, that makes a lot of sense, you know? And you kind of start seeing more and more, and just did more and more research and came to the conclusion that what was best for Molly was to
Molly.
Molly to not vaccinate at all, and we couldn't be any happier with our decision.
So now, did you have her at home?
Well, we actually started a home birth, and then I transferred, and I had a C-section because she was in the worst position and she wouldn't come, and she's still really stubborn.
Yeah.
So I labored for 40 hours.
Oh wow!
So
it's okay. We didn't want that anyway.
Yeah, so she was she didn't want to come out, so she was stubborn, still is, but yeah.
So did you get any pressure when you were in hospital for vaccine?
I was actually in the hospital when I was pregnant with the stomach flu for a week. It was like a whole thing. They couldn't figure out why my heart rate was so high, and I kept telling them I have a fever because I have the stomach flu, and they ordered me the flu shot and the pertussis one or whatever, and I was feeling real sassy, and I went up to the nurse and I said, over my dead body will I be getting that shot? And she's like, well, your whole family needs to get vaccinated against it then. And I was like, you know, we'll be fine, but thank you. And like I said, if anyone comes near me with that shot, like we'll just be leaving. So and then in my chart, when I think they just put a note in my chart to stop asking me about shots, like about her, because
once we had her,
they just never asked me anymore.
Yeah, I felt like there was definitely, like, at the hospital once we had her, it was kind of a little unspoken, like, you know, they were surprised we weren't getting any shots, but I feel like for the most part they respected our wishes. And
the one doctor said that she didn't get vitamin K either, and the one doctor was like, wow, we want to see that, but it's been over 24 hours and she's still here, so I think it'll be okay. So I think he even knows that, like, it's not needed in all cases.
So, are you guys scared that she might catch chickenpox, measles, or mumps, or any of that stuff?
No.
No, not at all. I think that, you know, her dealing with the chickenpox is something that, you know, when she gets it, that she'll get it and she'll be good after that, you know, and it's not really something that concerns us. The effects of vaccinating are, you know, more scary to us than dealing with chickenpox. So
hi, she's so alert and bright. Have you seen the dreadful effects of vaccines? Have you seen it in your life? And
a real close family friend, of my sister more so, she went and got her shots, and then I believe she like totally stopped talking and was just kind of like not there anymore and like wouldn't talk to them, and Took a while, but they prayed over her and were doing some detox stuff, and she came back, but then they stopped doing shots, and we've never had anything like that. She's never stopped talking. She's never lost the ability to speak or walk or talk or anything. So why would I do something that might bring that as a side effect?
Is there anything that's going to make you vaccinate her?
No.
Any amount of media pressure of, you know, this awful plague thing is out, or Ebola's killing everybody, or there's a new cancer vaccine, if you don't get it you will die, you know, all the usual stuff. Is any of that ever going to sway you?
No, because at the end of the day I can argue until I'm blue in the face with someone and show them this and this, and they can show me research, but I can look at my kid and I can look at your kid, and she's never been on antibiotics, and she's never had so much as a cold, and like your people's kids are in and out of the hospital all the time with respiratory, and they can't get over these sicknesses. So I can look with my own eyes and say, I actually think we're doing all right, so why would I change what I'm doing?
And so what about when people say, well, because of her, polio's going to come back? And, you know, you can be as rude as you like.
No, I would just say, all right, well, if that happens, we'll cross that bridge. But that's not going to happen, so we're just not going to have that conversation. I mean...
Yeah, we see that all the time. Like...
Hi, that's my mascara. Yo, where did you get that? Yeah, she's fine. Mine's only crap.
She's okay with it.
She's, that's good. Good finding.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, her pediatrician, like, she's so alert. They can't get over how alert she is.
Yeah, she is really alert.
Yeah, she's been that way since day one when she was born with a C-section. Her eyes were wide open, just like, finally someone came to get me. And ever since then, she just looks at everything so intently, and is just always like, I don't know, studying things, and it's great. But we've seen the scare tactics that is trying to be employed.
Our herd immunity.
And, what do you say to the herd immunity? What's your answer
Are
to
you
that?
up to date? Because if you hadn't gotten your boosters, you're part of the problem.
Yeah, I think that's.
And then they kind of calculate in their minds, like, oh, I haven't gotten a booster in a while, like.
For sure.
And when they say silly things like the because of vaccines, that's why there is no that kind of stuff.
I would encourage them to get dissolving illusions and to really look into clean water. And
she's so inquisitive, isn't she? Wait, how old is she again?
She's 1 year and 4 months.
Yeah.
She's really, really on the ball.
She's like, guys, you look a little hot. Here's some water.
Get some waters for you.
So what's your advice to other young parents that are very confused?
I would say just start.
Thank you, Molly.
Looking. First of all, start looking at other people that you know are unvaxxed. Look at their kids versus other kids, and then that should tell you a lot. Second of all, look at what's in it. And then, but most importantly, is look at the diseases that you're so terrified of, and how there's thousands of diseases in the world, but we're only afraid of these ones that have a matching vaccine. Like, I would look at that. Those would be my three top pieces of advice.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to talk with people. Like, we have so many friends and like that we know don't vaccinate, and they're a great just support system for us, like friends and family, just to know and like be willing to have those conversations and kind of find that support group and people who are going to support you and support your decision. And
if you're not rude about it and not in your face and telling you you're going to kill your child, then you could get a long way in having a conversation with someone.
Yeah, but just don't be afraid to not do it. I think that's the biggest thing, is people want to scare people into it so much, and we've just seen. And we're just so grateful every single day that we chose to not vaccinate her, and I don't really see anything that's going to change that decision in our minds. So,
how do you think they're going to get out of this, the other side? I mean, people are waking up, people like you, who are just basically doing your own research and waking up to the fact that vaccines are murderously dangerous. Excuse me.
Right.
How's this going to end, in your opinion?
I think it's going to end when people start looking objectively and looking at unvaxxed versus vaxxed and seeing the difference, the huge difference in it. And it's going to just happen one person by one person, just deciding enough is enough.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you know where she is?
Where is she?
I don't know.
Maybe.
I just checked she's not stuck.
She's driving away.
Oh, that's okay. She's taking over Toby's
There you
job.
go. She does love.
She's on your drive.
love
She's taking.
the
She wasn't
buttons.
like choking on something. She's got
Yeah.
hiccups back
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
But yeah,
she drinks a lot of water and gets hiccups.
I think the personal stories is so important. That's why I was excited to come here today
Thank
and
you.
do this. Just that the people who are fighting for vaccines, they don't want to hear what people have to say. It's just we'll look at this research that we
They're
did.
terrified.
But yeah, to hear that personal story of what people went through when they did vaccinate, or to hear like our story of like we didn't vaccinate and we're
she's alive and
standing by
well,
that,
and
and
somehow she's made it through.
yeah,
so
somehow,
far.
right? Just made it
And
through
everyone we
healthy.
know, no one we know has measles or mumps,
Yeah.
so she's not giving it to anyone either. So.
It's true. She's not infected anybody.
Now, if she did get measles or mumps or whatever,
Yeah.
any of these things, would you just send her out in the public, or would you keep her at home?
I keep her at home.
Oh, would you? Okay,
Yeah.
that's because you're responsible parents.
Yeah.
What else, Charles? Any more questions before
Yeah,
we go?
yeah, exactly. There you go.
Charles, you've done herd immunity.
I mean, she has got hand, foot, and mouth. There's no vaccine against that. Like no one keeps their kids at home when they're sick because God knows why. I don't know why people don't. But she's got hand, foot, and mouth from being out in the public. So, I mean, I'm smart enough to know that if she's sick, we keep her at home. Like we don't even go to church when she has a cold because we want to give it to all the other nursery kids.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's just common sense.
Anything else you guys want to add to this? Any advice? Anything else you want to say to the peeps? Everybody loves you, getting hearts and love.
Oh, thank you, everybody.
Just don't be afraid to do your own research. And if you know anyone that doesn't, ask them why. And I pretty much guarantee they have a compelling answer.
Yeah, definitely. And just don't be bullied. I mean, we've gone through a couple of different pediatricians because of what they've said. We had one pediatrician tell us that the most important thing we could ever do for our child was to vaccinate her.
And I was like, not even love her.
Yeah, love her, feed her,
clothe her. No, you need to get her fully vaccinated.
So, we've jumped around pediatricians a little bit, trying to find someone who's, on board with us, and just don't be bullied, and do your research and stand by that.
Well, I'm sorry to tell you did not really have any trolls. I don't know where they are.
Oh, man.
Oh, I'm sorry, Charles. Did I upset you on the last Periscope?
That's right, you shut them down.
Oh, dear. Okay. Anything else?
No, that's
okay.
it.
Well,
Thank you
love
so
and
much.
light to you,
Thank you,
and we'll be back. I think we have another unvaccinated
There we go.
story
There's more of
coming
them
up.
out there than you think.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, guys, back in a
everywhere.
minute.
The truth is, vaccine injuries are real and they've been ignored.
These childhood vaccinations, the people of America are telling us they are not safe and effective. We are seriously concerned at Children's Health Defense about the disinformation and misinformation out there.
Society does not want to acknowledge vaccine injury, period. My son's life has been ruined physically and emotionally, and he is persecuted for the mere fact that he exists.
After 8 years of litigation, HHS conceded by preponderance of the evidence that Chris died from her HPV vaccinations.
Parents deserve the truth. We deserve real informed consent because no parent should have to live the nightmare I do.
I am heartbroken to hear these stories. And it makes me want to do something.
How about we ban pharmaceutical ads on TV?
I've advocated it, and you have a co-sponsor.
The government has decided that this particular industry doesn't have to be liable to anybody.
I am extremely suspicious, as a lawyer, of immunity that is granted in any blanket way across the board to any manufacturer or to anyone.
So if we're gonna do something, the North Star has gotta be medical freedom. I get to decide what's good for me and my family with proper information. And if I'm given improper information, just like in any other industry, there's gotta be accountability.
No more Pfizer-sponsored science. We need independent science.
I am competing against a pharmaceutical lobby of 1,600 lobbyists. That's 3 lobbyists for each member of Congress. This is insane.
Everybody sitting here, bar 2, vaccinated their families with catastrophic results. Over 12,000 signatures on those 2 buses of death. death. When will enough be enough? How many more buses? So this has to stop. And we implore you, please, to follow us at Children's Health Defence, at least break down the truth and get to the truth behind the science of what is really happening.